Once again, welcome to this webinar about mastering multi-node configurations with Chef. This is part one of many webinars that we will conduct as part of the Chef Masterclass series.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. As AB pointed out, this is our first session of this new webinar series, so welcome. This is going to be a monthly webinar series, so the next session will be the end of June. The topic for that session is going to be around target mode, which I will mention a little today, a little bit later on in our demo. So I am Kurt Young, a Principal Solutions Engineer. I've been with Progress for a couple of years now, came into Progress as part of the Kemp acquisition, and nowadays I'm leading our technical marketing team within the Infra business unit, which of course includes Chef, but also Loadmaster, Flowmon, and What's Up Gold. So let's take a look at the agenda. So today's going to be mostly demonstration. I'll say there's a lot of different ways you can use Chef in your environments. So again, we're just going to use, this is just an example to kind of show and highlight some of the different components that make up Chef. And I'll also be referencing some additional features and functions throughout the webinar today, which I think would be great topics for future sessions. But we really would love to get your feedback as to what topics you feel would be most interesting, right? That's what's most important. So later on in the webinar, we're going to share a link with you so you can share your thoughts on some upcoming topics. But for today, we're going to start off doing compliance scans against a few of different systems running in our lab. And we're going to look at compliance profiles from both CIS, the Center of Internet Security, as well as some custom profiles I've created for the demo. Then based on these compliance scans, we're going to review a couple of cookbooks I put together to remediate those failed controls that are reported on those systems. Then we're going to go ahead and bootstrap those nodes and run those cookbooks against them, right, to bring these systems into that desired state we want. Then we'll come back around, do a final scan, which should show that our systems are now in compliance. That's the goal there. And then last, we're going to look at what's coming, right? What's new. For those of you who are not familiar with Chef Courier, I'll give a little bit of an overview of what that is and the value that that's going to deliver. Right now we're in beta with Chef Courier, but looking to release that very soon. And then of course we'll wrap up with Q&A at the very end. So the demo environment we'll be working in today consists of a Chef Automate and Infra server. They're running together. This is the system where we're going to go ahead and run and view those compliance reports as well as info on those managed nodes that we're running the cookbooks against. I've also deployed Workstation where I've built out those cookbooks and will be pushing them to Chef Infra to run against those nodes. And the nodes that we'll be working with themselves. So we'll be running against a few different systems here. We have two Windows servers, one that's running 2019, one that's running 2022. We have an Ubuntu 2004 system. And since CentOS 7 is end of life next month, I thought it would be nice to add that into our demo for one last time. Now, all of these systems are running in our lab environment, but again, if they were running in a public cloud or clouds, right, the approach is really going to be the same that we would, assuming we had that connectivity to those systems. And then again, like I said before, the agenda, once we bootstrap those systems, we'll be able to connect them into Infra, be able to pull down those cookbooks, and we'll run those cookbooks against these nodes. So with that, let's jump right into it. Okay, so I'm running, this is our Chef Automate system. I'm running a trial here, so you'll see me closing this little warning up here a few times throughout the demo. And coming in through compliance and profiles, you'll see we have a few profiles I've already downloaded and uploaded to this system, right? So we have these CIS profiles which are from the, as I mentioned, the Center of Internet Security. We have, these are benchmark profiles. So I have my CentOS, I have a couple Windows and Ubuntu. Then I have these 3 custom profiles that I've created and uploaded to automate here. One for CentOS, one for Ubuntu, and then the Windows one I combined it since I was looking at the same settings for both the 2019 and 2022 server. Over here, you'll see there's a lot of profiles to select from, right? 762 at this time. So you can come in here, search for, whatever you're looking for. Say you're looking for Red Hat. You'll see there's a whole bunch of different Red Hat, different versions, both workstation server, level 1, level 2. And we're also talking about, cloud. So if you wanted to, maybe, these were obviously running against operating systems, but if you wanted to run a scan against your cloud, so looking at AWS, for example, we have some profiles from CIS that will scan your AWS environment or Azure, as an example, running these foundation benchmarks against Azure. So this is all available from really that cloud security posture management standpoint, which again could be another topic if anyone was interested in getting more into that. But today we're not going to get too much into that. But from the scans that we're doing here, if I click scan jobs, you'll see I've run a few scans earlier today using the CIS benchmark profiles, as well as I ran 2 for the custom profiles that I uploaded. So if we were to look into these reports, you'll see these systems are not compliant, right? And drilling into these reports, you'll see that these CIS profiles are pretty thorough, to say the least, right? So there's 321 controls that are checked against the system. You'll see here on this kind of, out of the box vanilla Windows 2022 server, based on the CIS recommendations, there are 242 failed controls on the system, 79 passed. Now, these are obviously recommendations from CIS. Not every organization needs to go through and make sure that all of these failed controls are met. Everyone's organization is different requirements, different policies and things like that. But these are great to run to get that kind of baseline and benchmark against them. The other scan jobs on these other systems, you'll see very similar, like looking at the Ubuntu system here. This one has 205 total controls, 86 failed with 103 passed. But again, these are just obviously recommendations based on CIS. Now, these custom ones, which will be running against our systems, I've broken them down to simplify them a little bit. So these are only running 10 controls. And you can see from the CentOS system, I have 6 failed and 4 passed. And from the Windows system, or systems rather, we have again 10 controls, and we have 7 that have failed and 3 that have passed. But if we go into some of these things, you'll see as an example, let's just click into this one. You can drill into these controls, and even looking at the source, you can see what we're checking, right? So here we're looking at this security policy, minimum password age, right? And it should be greater than 1. You'll see later when we look at our recipes, we'll see some similar code that will be running to, again, remediate this, as this one was a failed control during our scan. Now, to run scans, close this again. Really straightforward, very simple, right? So going into settings, we have these node credentials. So here I have a few node credentials I've already created. I have some Windows using WinRM, and then I also have some credentials using SSH against our Linux systems in a Kubernetes environment. So to create one, just name, select what kind of credential type, the SSH username, and then you can use password or RSA key. Once you create these credentials and you go over into compliance and scan jobs, you'll see I've already added our CentOS, Ubuntu, and Windows systems here. But to add a new node, simple enough to give it an IP address or the host name. You can give it a kind of an optional friendly name there. and then just select whatever the, whether you're doing SSH or WinRM, select the credentials that you want to use to authenticate to this system. But again, since I've already installed, created them, we're all set there. So let's just create a scan job for this last Ubuntu system, since we already have Windows and CentOS complete. So I'll just drop down Automate. I can create a new filter rule. I'm just going to select our Ubuntu system. I'm going to select that custom Ubuntu profile here that I uploaded. Give it a name. And I could also, if I wanted to, set a schedule for this, right? I can run it at a later time, or I can repeat it every number of days, weeks, months, or even minutes. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and run a simple scan. And this, since only looking at 10 controls, or 10 controls within this profile, this scan is going to run rather quickly, right? As you can see, it's complete. And if I were to look at this, once again, we have a failed, hasn't met compliance, and out of the 10 controls, we have 6 failed. So that's kind of our current state of our system. So now we can go ahead and look at some cookbooks that we're going to run to remediate these systems. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into VS Code on this system. So this is, I'm connected to my workstation, that Chef workstation I showed in the diagram here, and I've created a repo, a Chef repo that I'm storing all my cookbooks in. And under cookbooks, you'll see I have these 3 cookbooks. One, just an example, we're not worried about that. That kind of comes out of the box. But I have a Windows remediation and a Linux remediation cookbook. So look at the Windows one first. So under there we have, under the cookbook, we have recipes, and I just have a single recipe here, default.rb, right? So Ruby file, which has the code that I want to run against these systems. Now again, a lot of, those who may not want to use Ruby, there's also the option for certain cookbooks and recipes to use YAML as a language to put your code in, and use YAML rather than Ruby. But Ruby is obviously the default, and we'll be using it in this demonstration. So you'll see here some similar things that we saw in that compliance, right? We have the security policy, which is our resource, right? So we have a lot of different resources available to build your code for, right? So there's based on your operating system and things like that, you'll use one of the resources, or if there's a resource that isn't available to do what you need to do, is you have the ability to create custom resources on your own to interact with those systems that there may not be a resource for currently. But for this case, we have resources available that we're setting the minimum password length, maximum minimum age, things around complexity, as well as lockout duration. Down here we have different, aside from security policy, we can update registry keys, right? So wouldn't be a good demo unless we're dealing with Windows and hacking the registry, right? So we have a few registry keys we're going to update here based on SMB, ICMP, and then we have a log, event log security warning level that we want to change the setting for. And then finally, we have this last, to create a scheduled task that is going to run the Chef client on a certain interval. So there's a lot of configuration that can happen around this scheduled task entry. By default, just by entering this, it's going to use the default, which is going to run every 30 minutes in our environment. And we'll get into a bit more about scheduling and what's different with scheduling when it comes to Chef Courier later, and the orchestration capabilities in Chef Courier. So stay tuned for that. So that's our simple recipe. And then also down here, I'm going to highlight this policy file. So here, the policy file, we have a name, and then we have the run list. So we're going to include this policy file when we bootstrap these systems that we're going to run it against. So I just want to kind of highlight this. Now, there's a lot you can do with policy files, and again, could be another topic for a future session of this web series. But today we're going to just kind of look at some of the basics around policy files and how we're going to use them to associate our cookbook and recipes with our managed nodes. So with all that, let me get some things here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're already in the Windows remediation directory here. So the first thing I'm going to run is this chef install policy RB command, right? So what it's going to do, it's going to create this policy file lock.json, which was already there because I had already run this. Then what we can do is we can run this chef command to push this policy.lock.json file to our infra server. And we're going to do it with this environment that we're going to call prod. And when we do that, we'll push that to infra. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to use the knife command to upload our Windows remediation cookbook to our Chef infra server, right? And just putting the cookbook path here, which is our Chef repo / cookbooks. And we'll push that. With all of that done, we can now bootstrap our Windows servers. So let me use once again, using the knife command, we're going to run knife bootstrap, and we're going to use WinRM with the IP address of our Windows. This is our Windows 2022 server. So we'll give it a name, and we're going to give it a username and password to authenticate to install the Chef client. And then we're going to use this policy -group prod, and then the policy name, which is Windows remediation, which is part of that policy file. So by providing these policy group and policy names in the Bootstrap, what it's going to do is it's going to associate this cookbook with that node, the Chef node Win22, and it's going to actually run that cookbook against it as well. So we're going to go ahead and launch that. So while that's bootstrapping, right, so one of the things is, right, we're installing this Chef client on this system, right? And you know, again, a lot of times we have, you know, customers saying, well, there's certain systems, right, which I can't install a Chef client on, whether that be, you know, some sort of networking device, router, switch, or something like that, where you can't install the Chef client. We do have the option to use target mode, right? And I mentioned that before as our future session in June. So you'll be learning more about target mode of how to use agentless connections to devices that are in your environment. So stay tuned for that. So that one is bootstrapped. I'm going to run this other knife command to bootstrap our second 2019 server, right, using the same command and associating it with that Windows remediation policy file. So while that's running, let's take a look at this Linux remediation cookbook. So this one, again, we have the default .rb file for Linux. So this one is, we have doing a few different things here. It's not as straightforward, basic as that Windows one. So we have some resources here. We're mounting a temp directory. We're installing some packages on this one, IP tables. And then down here, we're using this template resource. So what this is there are certain controls failed in our compliance scans where we needed to add some entries in a file, right? So this etc login.def, and then you have systemd journald.conf, right? So these two are common across the CentOS and the Ubuntu system, right? So we have just the one Linux cookbook, but we're going to update both the CentOS and Ubuntu system. So these were common across the two. So in order to modify these files, what we're using is this source, which is a template file, which is called login-devs.erb. So under the templates directory, you'll see I have these ERB files, right? So if you look at this one as an example, it is the full file that is on that system with some modifications to it. So what it's going to do is it's going to take this file and it's going to overwrite the one that's on those systems. And you'll see I have a bunch of them. Again, journal D is the same thing, where this all I need to enable is this forward to syslog, which is now set to yes. But I needed to actually have all of this data, so I wasn't like overwriting. You know, if I just set to write forward to syslog, it would have overwritten all of this stuff, and it would just had forward to syslog, which would not have been my desired state. Then down here, these files are different for each of these two systems, right? Ubuntu and CentOS. So here I can have some code that's looking at the platform, right? The attribute platform, and saying when the platform is Ubuntu, I want you to run this one, right? I want you to use this common password ERB, and I want you to update this common password file. When it's CentOS, these are the two files you should be updating, system-auth and password-auth. These two files are not part of Ubuntu, and this file is not part of CentOS. So here we can get very, kind of specific on what we want to run for what systems based on a attribute, in this case, platform. And then here we're running this Chef client cron, which is going to create that scheduled cron job to run it again every 30 minutes. So with that, let me change the directory here to Linux remediation. Right, and now I'm going to do the same thing to the policy file, because the policy file in this one, let me just click it real quick, is very much the same, right? It's got Linux remediation as the name, and then the run list, which is Linux remediation and default recipe. So I'll just run that chef policy file RB, and we'll go ahead and push it using the prod environment. And then the knife command to upload the cookbook, Linux remediation, to our Chef infra server. And then we'll bootstrap. And now this bootstrap is very similar to the other one, right? We're not using WinRM, we're using the default SSH, which I don't need to put in here because it's a default. So we're going to bootstrap to this IP address, this name, we're using root in this example, and again, assigning that policy group, but this time using the Linux remediation policy name rather than Windows. We don't want to run the Windows cookbook against the Linux system. So yes, we want to continue. We'll wait for this one to complete. And then we'll run the next one, and then we'll jump back into automate and take a look at a few things before we do that final scan again to make sure that the systems are now compliant. So you can see here it's updating, installing the package. So it's running through the recipe in the cookbook to update everything. Okay, that one is done. And we'll do the second one. Go to the Ubuntu system, and we'll run that. This kicks off, and while this is running, let's go take a look at go back to automate here. So while we're waiting for that to run and before we run these scans, let's go over to infrastructure, and you'll see here now, I could have come here before, there have been no nodes available. We see 3 here. We see our CentOS, our Win19, and Win22. If we were to look into these, and you can see this was just 6 minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, and a few seconds ago when the CentOS one finished. If we look into these, we can click in here and we can see kind of the resources that were run against this system. In addition to this, and seeing that the run was 100% successful, we can also look at attributes, and we were talking before about that platform attribute that we were identifying, Ubuntu versus CentOS. So you can see here, we're collecting a little bit of information around these systems, right? There's like over 3,800 attributes that we've have identified on the system. So if we were to look at something like search for platform family as an example. And you can see here this platform family, and then above it you'll see the platform. This is what we used in our recipe, and we're looking for this entry here. So when we ran it, right, we were making sure that CentOS was the platform before we applied those changes to those files that were associated with CentOS. In Ubuntu would be the same thing. But a lot of things you can do here with attributes when you're dealing with your recipes to make sure you're running things against the right systems and the right way. So there's a lot of things you can do with attributes. And again, maybe another topic for a future session where we can really dig into attributes and looking at how to use them. So let me go back to here. So now we see our Ubuntu system did finish as well. So now we have 4 nodes total, and everything is looking good from a past perspective from just running the cookbooks, right? So now if we go back to compliance, let's see, at this point, we see we have 4 nodes that are not compliant because we ran them before. We ran the compliance scans before we did the remediation. So now if we create new scan jobs, let's do first, this will just take a minute. Do CentOS first, take our compliance scan here, and we'll call CentOS final. We'll create one for Ubuntu. Select Ubuntu profile. Well, that Ubuntu final, and then last we will create the last scan job for both of our Windows servers, Windows 2019, and we'll create this one for 2022. Take our custom Windows profile, and we'll do a scan against that. So you'll see these are already completed. This Windows 1 is still going, so let's look at the CentOS first. And our system is now compliant. So we drill in here, all 10 controls have passed. We'll go back to Ubuntu. And once again, we're good here. Everything is now passed. And then finally, we have our Windows, which once again, 2 nodes, both of them are in a pass state and everything is there. So going back to reports, now we see all of our nodes are in a pass state from a compliance standpoint. So that was kind of a lot, jumping back and forth. I hope I didn't go too fast, but I wanted to make sure I could fit it all in. I wasn't, dragging my feet and taking too long. But let's go back to our deck here and talk a little bit about what's to come. So what's new? So that is Chef Courier. So what Chef Courier is, it's a job orchestration tool solution, which is going to really provide more control than you ever need when it comes to orchestration of things. And we broke this up really among these 3 dimensions of the whatever, the wherever, and the whenever. So if we look at the whatever, it's really what actions are you really looking to take on the systems that you're looking to do configuration management and or whatever you need to do on, whether it's application deployments or whatever it might be. So using things, scripts or OS commands or obviously cookbooks of what you need to do, policy files, inspect profiles, which again, the inspect profiles is the compliance piece of it, doing whatever you need to do on those systems. The wherever is, where do you need to run this on? The set of nodes that you're running it on. What we did in our demonstration here is we, use policy files to run these cookbooks against these systems. With Courier, the control you have on running these jobs in their Courier jobs is what they're called, is you can actually control how you want to run them. Do you want to run them sequentially or parallel, or do you want to run them in batches? As an example, you may have a web farm in your environment that consists of, say, 4 servers maybe their maybe it's a website for web servers, and you need to update those systems, patch them or whatever it might be. You really would not want to patch all of them at the same time, right? Because then a reboot's going to happen, or the services are going to be taken down to run this update. So your site, which could be business critical, would be down in that case. With Chef Courier, you'd have the ability to say, I want to run this update on only 2 nodes at a time, and only move to the next node once those 2 nodes are successfully patched and the job is successful. Then move on to the next one. So you can have this kind of rolling batched deployment where there'll never be less than 2 systems running all the time, right? So you have that kind of control, and also by selecting what nodes, right? You can do based on the node ID, which you're just saying, I want to run on this node, or a query. So maybe you're looking for nodes that are in a certain time zone, or nodes that are in a certain subnet or something like that. You can query, and based on the attributes of that node, it'll run the job on it. So a lot of different things you can go to in that sense of the wherever. And of course, the whenever. This is the scheduled piece of it, right? So being able to either run these jobs on demand or schedule them in the future, or reoccurring, to say, I want to run it, whenever, however often you want to, and then putting the exceptions in there. You could have a blackout time where you can't do any updates on the systems, and you can put those exceptions in there as well. Again, this illustration on here is beta. As I said before, we are in beta right now, so it's only using the API, the CLI, to do jobs. But so this illustration is for just illustration purposes only. So anyone that's interested in the beta, you can sign up now, and this is just kind of highlighting a few use cases that again, we're not limited to these use cases, but just some things to give some ideas about how you might be able to use Chef Courier, whether it be incident response, patching, service request, again, security and compliance, running scans against those systems, application deployment, and then other workflows and tools, and being able to even integrate Courier with some third-party tools to have more control and both from input and outputs from Chef Courier. A lot of different things you can do with Chef Courier. So we do have, even though again we're still in beta, there's some web pages created around some of the solution pages based on some of these use cases. We have some videos on our YouTube channel that highlight some of these demos, these that are obviously working demos of Chef Courier in action you can take a look at. So I certainly recommend you have a look at that. Now we'll get into questions, but before we do, we are going to put that link into the chat, so you can go ahead and give us some feedback on the topics in future sessions of this webinar series. So we really would love to hear that. There's also going to be a survey at the end. Please, take a minute to fill that out, get some feedback. So again, we want to make sure that we shape this webinar series into something that's very useful to you, right? That's again very important to us. So please do that. Let's see here, some questions. Okay, so I see the form is in there, the questions. Okay. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay. So yeah, we have a question here. Do you have to use the automate interface to run compliance scans? Is there a CLI available to script these scans? So great question. There is. The inspect exec command you can use to run compliance scans from CLI. So you don't need to necessarily use the automate. You can run it within the CLI as well. Another question we have here is how many resources are available from Chef. Okay, so I don't know the exact the exact number, but there's well over 150, I think, last time I saw, of different resources, and within those resources, there's endless things you can do within each one of those resources. So yeah, and we're always constantly adding more resources available. And like I said before, for any resources that aren't there, custom resources are available for you to build yourself for those systems that we don't have a resource for, and you need to do some modification, configuration on those systems. Let's see if there's any more questions. Yeah, so if someone can share the YouTube link, that would be helpful for folks that want to take a look at some of the Courier videos as well. Any other questions? Let me see here. Sorry, hold on a second. View of this thing is not the best. Let me see. Sorry, everyone. Let me just. Here we go. Okay. How about showing continuous compliance? Okay. Yep. We could definitely. Yeah. So I think that could certainly be another session where we're talking about compliance phase of continuous compliance. So that could certainly be. I would recommend that we do that as far as another session, another topic to have. Let me see what else we have here. Oops, that's what just to blank. What are some examples of what we can be managed agentless? So yeah, so I mean, in June we'll be doing a whole session on target mode, but there's things like I was saying before, Cisco switches, right? That wouldn't allow the Chef client agent to be installed on a Cisco switch, or even our own Progress Load Master, right? Our load balancer. Our load balancer is a hardened Linux OS. And there's, you can't install agents on that system, so that would require an agentless target mode configuration, as an example. So there's a lot of different devices that you really just can't install the agent on, just because you're unable to, because of the device it is. Let's see if I can get a couple more in here. Are the CLI tools available in the beta for Chef Courier? I'm assuming this question's for, and yes, you can use CLI in Chef Courier. And I'm having a hard time navigating this question thing, so I'm sorry if I'm trying to scroll up and down here. Compliance fees. I think yeah, I'm sorry if I'm missing any of these things. We could follow back up with any more, but I think that is it as far as the questions. And again, sorry if I missed anything. I'm having a hard time navigating this question pane here. It's very small to read. So yeah, again, well, listen, thank you everyone for joining today, and I hope this was useful. And again, please help us with shaping this webinar series moving forward with the survey and the question we put in the chat. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you again at the end of June when we start getting into target mode. And anything we can do, please reach out, and we'd love to have further conversations of how we can get, Chef, how Chef can help within your organizations, yeah, moving forward. So I appreciate everyone's time, and everyone have a great day.